So cool. Yeah, Mark did a great job. The race was awesome.
It
Beautiful.
always is. It's such an amazing experience, eh?
Yeah. Well, what was crazy is that afternoon, the wind came up and it was
I know.
victory at sea out there. And it was like, just imagine if, because the wind is so unpredictable here. And you're
Yeah.
just like, I mean, just imagine swimming in that. I said, that would have been fun. It wouldn't have been good for people, but it would have been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we've been lucky more times than not, but you're absolutely right that the wind tends to pick up in the afternoon. So, the Cross Lake Swim has been essentially scheduled to maximize our success. Like i.e., middle of July is the least rainy time in all of Kelowna, and first thing in the morning is the least windy time.
Mm-hmm.
So. And a weekend, of course, is when there's the least boat traffic. First thing in the morning, it's good. So we have to kind of consider a few different variables, and we've been lucky more often than not. But every once in a while, I know it's going to be pissing rain one day, and it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. I have to do that with my swim camps, except for it's jellyfish.
Yeah, I've heard that there's been a massive number of jellyfish. What's with that? In the Mediterranean, particularly.
It's the Mediterranean. So what's happened in the Mediterranean is all these ships coming from other places, such as Australia, dump their bilge.
Oh, sure.
And they dump their bilge, so they'll bring in Australian, like, because we experience them in Tunisia and Sicily. And so they dump the bilge, and then these, basically the jellyfish don't and turtles are on decline. Turtles eat jellyfish, and turtles are eating plastic, killing them. So there's fewer predators for the jellyfish. So, I mean, it's going to be a global issue very soon. But in Hawaii, we actually have a bloom. So it's 9 to 12 days after the full moon. And there is actually a jellyfish calendar that you'll find, like for Waikiki. They get them really bad on Oahu. We don't get them very much on the Big Island. But so I accidentally scheduled a camp during the middle of the bloom, and we went to Captain Cook, and people got dolphins, but they swam into jellyfish. They loved the dolphins, didn't like the jellyfish so much. And one lady did go to the hospital. She was a doctor. She said, I'm just going to go get something to tamper down this response. And other than that, but now it's like, oh, I get that calendar out and I plan out the accordingly. Yeah, just stay away from it. But like I said, our island is a lot less severe than, say, Oahu. Those things will just litter the beach, and just literally that you'll never read about it in a tourist magazine because they don't want to say don't come to Hawaii. Yeah, but it's there. Yeah, and even outside the window. Yeah. So Jason, you're feeling better.
I'm feeling quite a bit better. Yeah, like that was kind of it kind of knocked me on my backside. I made it 2.5 years without getting sick, and then we went out to Winnipeg and for a family event, and on the way back I crashed hard. Like I was out for about 2.5 days with like I said, felt like my entire body was on fire, and I was fine after that, and I got my energy back for the most part, a couple days after that. But the long lasting fatigue and the brain fog and stuff like that lasted like a good 10 days.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Bugger.
But today is about Karlyn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a short video here. And then, like I said, this is a conversation over coffee. So, I mean, I know you and Mark are friends. So, I'm just, I'm grateful to be, part of this conversation today. So,
thanks. Well, thanks for having us.
All right, here we go. All right, so we're here, episode 3, Open Water Series. Karlyn Pipes, co-host Mark Fromberg from across the lake, and Karlyn is. It seems like everybody in the world of swimming knows who Karlyn is. So I was really pleased when you accepted the invitation to come here and speak with us and kind of talk about, I guess everybody's own unique passion for open water swimming, because everybody does it for their own reasons and they love it for their own reasons and stuff like that. But As I was preparing for this, I kind of went through and just, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better before we spoke. You have, quite the inspiring story leading up to today. So,
Thank you.
I wanted to go through that and, let Mark kind of jump in whenever he wants to jump in. I know that you just competed you enjoyed the experience of the open water swim at the Across the Lake swim this year, which turned out to be an amazing event. And Mark will get into that a little bit later, but I would just love it, like in your words, rather than me kind of, paraphrase what I've learned through reading about you, like take us through the journey. And I titled this episode "The Do-Over" after your book.
Oh, great.
And, take us through the journey of getting into swimming, sort of dealing with the demons, coming back into it, mid-30s, and then, building what you've built since then.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks, Jason, for having me on the show. And Mark, I wasn't expecting you to be here, but this is great. I never can get enough of Mark when I'm in Kelowna, and it doesn't seem like we have a schedule that cooperates. So let's get together for dinner soon.
Yeah, sure. We'll do it.
Yeah, so the Cliff Note version is, wow. When I first got into swimming at a pretty early age, probably 3, 4, I grew up in an alcoholic home. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was in survival mode. And when I went to the pool, it kind of and it was able to fulfill a lot of the needs that I wasn't being met, especially when I took swimming lessons. It was warm. I was a skinny child and I was cold all the time. So the water was warm and comforting. But more importantly, when I learned to swim through the YMCA, the instructors were supportive. They gave me attention, they approval and acceptance. And I felt all that from the water and from those early on instructors. So I loved everything about swimming when I was a little girl. And I turned out I was actually pretty good at it. And I was identified as I think at age 5 to be put on the swim team for my backstroke. And I think I just love backstroke because you could just look around and kind of be a part of what was going on instead of head down. And anyway, so I was on the first swim team when I was 5 or 6 years old and excelled at that, mostly just because so many of the needs that I was not being taken care of in this alcoholic dysfunctional home were being met at the pool. And so I quickly kind of translated to here's where I feel loved and successful and accepted. Big one. And didn't really feel that too much at home, and my siblings would all probably agree, but we all swam at one time. So I continued on in my swimming career into my teens, and then and right about age 14, 15, I had a coach that was a gold medalist in the Olympics, and he's like, Karlyn, if you'd worked hard, you'd have a really good shot at making the Olympics. And I was also kind of one of those kids that I was talented, but I also kind of figured out a little bit back then that I didn't have to work as hard as other people. My success came pretty easily to me. And if I did work hard, I actually had great results. And I had great results when I was age 15. I qualified for the junior national championships and I won the 400 medley, which was kind of surprising to me. And as a result, the very first ever Olympic training camp at the Colorado Springs was evolving, and I was invited to go to the Olympic Training Center, the first ever swim camp for Olympic hopefuls. And that year, it was very momentous. I win the 400 IM at the age of 15. I get invited to go to this Olympic training camp, and I turned it down. And the reason why I turned it down was that same year I had my first alcoholic buzz. I had a drink, I felt that buzz, and as soon as I felt that buzz, it was like a huge pressure release, like an overfilled tires. It was like, psst, just this relief. And I loved that feeling. And I was thinking, it's like winning, but with a lot less work. And so I quickly went from out of the pool and into the bottle. And there began my struggles. I still had this talent. I still had to go to swim practice. There was a lot of pressure placed on me by my mom to continue to train. She had invested a lot when I was younger. Now that I was older, it was my turn to do more of the work. And I really didn't want it. So hold on a second. And so so that age 15 was really a turning point in my Olympic dream, which I would really say wasn't really my dream. It was others around me. But there's an interesting thing that happens in the minds of, people always think that when you have talent, that you want that talent, that you want that gift, and you don't. That's what everybody else. That's what the world sees. Is hold on a second. It's what the world sees, but you are the one that has this gift that was given to you. You didn't ask for it, and you're supposed to take care of it or nurture it or empower it. And if you don't want that gift, it's really a struggle, because you have it, but yet you're not using it. And then there's guilt, and then there's pressure, and then there's stress. And where I found the release from that was drinking more. So that became my downward spiral to, here's what I should be doing. This is what's expected of me. This is what I can do. But there's a part of my brain that was also saying, I don't want that. That's not me. I want the easier way. I want the softer way. Swimming is hard. Drinking was easy. And that battle went on until I was age 31, until I was drinking a liter of vodka a day, waiting to die. I was drowning. I was a lifeguard, a world record holder still at that time, and I couldn't save myself. So I entered rehab and went to a 10-day detox, and didn't know if I was going to make it because it was so severe. My blood alcohol was huge. Mark knows the number. It's astronomical. And I'm really, but when I turned a corner and I could start feeling hope, because, as an alcoholic, you become, you're hopeless and helpless. You're hopeless in that you can make a difference, and you're helpless in stopping this without help. And I didn't reach out to help until it was almost too late. So grateful my mom intervened, which is interesting. She was the one to put the pressure on me, but she was also the one that came to my rescue and got me into rehab. And I remember about day 2 or 3, I convulsed, I had hallucinations. There's a story in the book. They have to get a chest x-ray, and I'm convulsing so severely that I can't walk. And they take a wheelchair and they line it with blankets, and they set me in the wheelchair, and then they wrap the blanket around me like papoose style to stop the convulsion. And then they wheel me down to the x-ray room, and they unwrap me, lower the chest x-ray because I can't stand. And then, and I remember people looking at me with pity, like, that woman is really sick. And I couldn't look at people because I knew that the only person responsible for this situation I was in was me. And that pity that they had towards me was not deserved, or just being aware that somebody was hurting. I deserved it. So when I kind of turned a corner and I had hope for the first time in a very, very long time, one of the things that really helped me was thinking about my swimming career. I was like, Karlyn, this is really hard. You want to just get out. I begged 2 days into it for them to take me home, and they wouldn't, because I knew if I could get a drink, I would relieve this pain. And when I wasn't allowed to do that, I started finding other ways to gain strength. And that was to rely on what I knew from the past. It's like, as a swimmer, you did some really hard things. You trained really hard at times. And you know what? I'm a swimmer. I can get through this. And once I turned the corner, that's pretty much the direction that I went in. I went back into the water, made peace with it, and started swimming again for mostly health reasons. And it was something that made me feel good, and I was pretty good at it. And then a lot of the world records that have, continued after that are really a result of that love, that love of the water and the freedom that you feel in the water, and especially open water. So a lot of people would say, wow, there's a lot of records under your belt, but I love to say, that's pretty nice. If you Google my name, there's a lot of records that will show up in the Google search, but not a single police record. I didn't kill anybody. I did a lot of damage to myself and the relationships around me, but in a lot of ways, sometimes that's the best non-record I could have ever have had, because it could have certainly gone differently had I, in my drunkenness, harmed somebody, severely. So, I'm very grateful for that. And I'm just grateful for this do-over, every day you wake up and it's like, wow, this is a gift,
Yeah. I mean, so just briefly take us through, like, going back to the NCAA at age 35. And then, Kona and your open water swim business, how you met Mark for the first time. And then I'll kind of let you guys kind of geek out there a little bit on open water.
That's awesome. Oh, it was really I love to teach. I love sharing the information that I've accumulated from swimming in an endless pool, which is a swimming treadmill, but it's also a scientific environment. And Mark and I can geek out because it is pretty fun. But, my dad was an alcoholic. He never realized his dreams. He died with a wet brain, very peacefully, but, and the wet brain means that he wasn't able to retain anything from about 55 on, but he didn't drink anymore. And I always used to think that my dad, the only thing that I got from my dad was his blue eyes, dimples, and the gene for alcoholism. But what I realized is my dad was a brilliant musician. He could play every instrument well. He could sing. He was a cartoonist. I mean, he had a lot of hopes and dreams that he, never realized. And I realized that the gift that he gave me, the greatest gift of all, is this gift of teaching. And I just love sharing stuff. Mark knows that. I'll be on pool deck, and if there's just a person swimming in the next lane next to me and I have something to say, I'll chime in there and provide some tips and just kind of give it away, and then hope that, whatever I share with you, maybe you share with others, so we can spread this information around. But going back to NC2As, that was really the epitome of the do-over, because I had given up. So recovering alcoholic, former bulimic. I was also bulimic during the years that I was an alcoholic, and I was a 6-time college dropout. So So that's the thing about the alcoholic. Every day you kind of wake up with this idea that you can do it differently. And then as soon as you have that first drink, which happens earlier and earlier and earlier in your drinking career, it washes away any hope of that day being any different. So you stop hoping, and you really give up. You don't care. You've gone too far. You don't think that there's any way to come back. So when I got sober, I realized I hadn't fried my brain, and started taking some classes, and I parlayed that into 2 years at a community college, and then still had eligibility left to swim Division II NC2A, and I went to Cal State Bakersfield for 1 year. And so when I walked on that deck at NC2As and saw that blue ball saying NCAA, I was like, wow, I made it back. And that was really, really, really a cool point. But also, too, I realized it wasn't just my doing. It was the people along the way that believed in me long before I believed in myself. First was my ex-husband, Eric Nielsen. Then Patty Waterman, my coach at Palomar. She's like, yeah, let's see if you have any eligibility left. And then I spent 2 years at Palomar, and then Cal State Bakersfield. She took a chance on a ex-drunk and gave her a full scholarship at age 35. She had no idea if I was going to drink again. And so it was when I stepped up on the blocks at NC. Oh, and John Baker, a guy that I worked for at Naval Amphibious Base when I was a lifeguard and went through the rehab, they didn't fire me. He said, okay, we're going to put you on probation, but we're going to give you your job back as a lifeguard. And then I ended up getting my first ever full-time job at age 31. And John Baker was a swimmer. So when I was inducted into the Swimming Hall of Fame, all of those characters of my story, all those people that had believed in me before I believed in myself, were there and up on stage with me, in, so to speak, because I couldn't have done it without them. So there's a lot of angels along the way that have been looking out for me, which means that I have a responsibility to make what time I have here on this earth count, make a difference.
No kidding.
It's great that on the one hand, when you were talking about your teenager years, where you were kind of resenting the hard work of swimming and how it was something that you didn't want. It was like you had
Yeah.
talked about how this was a gift, and yet you didn't want to pursue it. And of course, alcohol was the easier step out because it was
Yep.
easy to compared to hard. And yet you've made the transition back to swimming, and now not only is it not hard, it's joyful,
Mm.
and like I guess it's just almost miraculous how that kind of transition sometimes happens in people. But you've been able to embrace the very thing that you were running from as a 15-year-old.
It's true, and I think every time I got to step up on the blocks sober was just a gift, and realizing that I mean, the way the rehab entry went, had I not been able to see a doctor on Friday, and my mom wasn't going to able to get an appointment till Monday, I would have passed. And Mark, I've asked you beforehand, so how does an alcoholic die? What
Mm,
causes death? And I think you said, well, cardiac arrest,
mm,
because you've got the fibril. Anyway, the terminology,
mm,
but
mhm,
you just realize it was just like those hundredths of a second in a swimming finish, right? It could have gone a hundredths of a second the other way, and I
mm,
wouldn't be here. So that responsibility, once I assumed it, was actually was, like I said, joyful, because I'm like, yeah, I have another chance. I can do something with this,
mhm,
and didn't really know that I would make swimming my vocation and my passion. So that's
mhm,
pretty
mhm.
cool.
Yeah, I love the transition to joyfulness in swimming, and
Yeah.
and and how it took you what sounds like almost a decade and a half to find it, despite the fact that you had it in your hands the whole time,
I
as a
know.
15-year-old, and yet it took until you were in your 30s to kind of re-embrace it, and now it's almost in a very positive sense your healthful addiction, if I can put it that way. This is what moves you forward. This is how you start your day. This is, you start earlier and earlier. It's got some similarities there, and yet of
Mhm.
course it's positive and constructive compared to what you did before.
Oh yeah, yeah. The wreckage of my past. It's still around. Every once in a while, I'll remember something, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a
Yeah.
little niggle. And I did a lot of years in AA, and I strongly recommend the group support for that. And now I have other group supports, and systems. But accountability. One of the cornerstones of my sobriety was accountability, because when you're a drunk, you could say, I'm not responsible. I didn't do that. I
Mm,
was drunk,
mhm.
and you push it off. And
Yeah.
when I got
I
sober,
know.
accountability to me was the cornerstone. It just was
Mhm,
like, okay, I am responsible,
mhm,
and
mhm, mhm,
I gladly take it. So it's like, good stuff.
mhm, mhm.
Oh,
And now you have accountability for your swimming because, every time you succeed at doing something in your swimming career, um, it's about you. I mean, you're accountable to your successes as well, right?
yeah. And it's really fun. I also find other reasons to go break records, so to speak, and to go
Mhm,
compete. I
mhm,
just was in May in Tunisia at a
mhm,
swim meet, and it was a swim meet that was going well before COVID, and I found out about it from a friend, and so I thought, I'll go and experience this swim meet. And I ended up setting two world records. And this is the fifth time that this meet has ever run. And I can look at that and step back and say, this adds some credibility to the swimming competition, and the organizers and the people that are spending their time and energy to get people so that you have a stage to perform on. So whatever I can do sometimes just to swing things that way. And it was
mhm,
really fun. I
mhm.
was up on the awards, and Mark, I don't know if you saw this picture. So Tunisia is French, African. It's in northern Africa. It's a Arabic country now, more so
Yeah,
than anything else.
yeah.
And there's a picture of me getting ready to jump in for backstroke, and I'm in a high tech $500 bathing suit, and there's a gal right next to me, and she's got a full covering, full arms, full full leg suit and we're going to race. And the contrast is just amazing because we come from different walks of life, different religious beliefs, political, whatever. But yet in the water, we are two swimmers hoping for the best. And it doesn't matter, you know, and it was great. It was just really, really fun. And sharing with these people and a lot of times there's a little bit of people are like, oh, is that Karlyn Pipes? And then I'm the one that initiates a conversation. We're just swimmers, you know, some are faster, some are not as fast. We're doing the same thing and we're all hoping for the same thing, to do our best.
That's pretty awesome. I wanted to, I had a thought strike me while you were talking there about the do-over and the kind of like the inherent lessons in that, because I find so often, you know, especially, you know, if you talk about it from a generational perspective, especially with somebody like your dad and how you described him and so on and so forth, you're so often met with this idea that, you know, you reach a certain point in a journey and it's time to move on. You reach a certain point in something and somebody else will tell you, you know what, I think it's time for you to do something else, right? Rather than like you being able to look at them and say, why? I'm enjoying it. Right? And, you know, like I run a business and like I come from a background of coaching. So getting into business was a brand new foray for me. So like there was a lot to learn and I'm always happy to learn all that stuff. And I'm not shy to say like I made a ton of mistakes. I'm really small, I'm really big. And you know, what I realized after, you know, like one day I made, you know, a colossal mistake and it wasn't life ending, but I was able to get up and say, well, I can do it differently today. I can figure out a way to start over or whatever, and just go ahead and do it again. So I guess getting to my question or my comment that hopefully spurs, you know, more discussion on it, like the idea of the do-over. I think it's such an important and powerful idea. Like when you like something and you're committed to it, you enjoy it. And in this case, talking about swimming, something that brought you back to center after, you know, this tumultuous journey, let's call it, right? And you know, the importance of the do-over and giving people permission to say, no, I like this. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to find a way to be successful or get to where I want to go. I mean, like that's a powerful message.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's such a simple message too, because every day that, you know, is like yesterday is gone. You always say, you know, yesterday is the past and tomorrow's the future and today is the present. It's a gift, right? Today's the present. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether you're talking about your job, relationships, your health. Every day you wake up, you have a new opportunity to do it over. And you can, and actually any time during the day, you know, a conversation doesn't go well. Something happens. It's like, okay, do it over, you know? And, you know, Mark and I, we spend time in the pool and do repeats. And it's like, okay, I want to see if I can go faster or do something or other. Okay, this time I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it over. You know, this next 100, I'm going to do it over and maybe learn something from it. So I think it's just a universal thing. If you can get in that mindset, I don't like this, or I think I could do better, or I'd like to do it differently, do it over.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's also a matter of kind of embracing your mistakes and learning from them. I mean, there are people who, you know, they're afraid to fail. And because of that, they'll never try. You know, it's like Wayne Gretzky once said, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, you know. And so if you try something and it doesn't
That's
work,
a good one. I like that.
Then, you know, okay, it didn't work and now you learn from it. You know, history is rife with people who embrace their mistakes and they are always inevitably successful. You know, they say Thomas Edison tried to make a light bulb 10,000 times before he got it right. And and his assistant said, hey, you know, Mr. Edison, you're about to have your 10,000th failure. And he said, no, I've just learned 10,000 ways of how not to make a light bulb. And so,
how not to do it.
And so basically you're just eliminating things. No, that didn't work. No, that didn't work. No, that didn't work, until you get to something that does work. So, you know, it's and that gets back to the whole learning environment thing. I mean, anybody who's struggled and been knocked off your pedestal, literally and figuratively, you you know, it's about how you get back on it, and how
Yeah.
you embrace, you know, and like if in the positive learning environment, um, boy, oh boy, that's so embracing, if you will. It's
Yeah.
if you have the right kind of coach or even friend who you know, supports you and is not critical of, oh, you blew it again, or you're just a loser, or something like that. You know, that can hurt your soul,
Yeah.
and of course it will stop you from trying. But if you can actually say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with not doing it right the first day, and as you say, let's do it over again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, until you actually embrace and enjoy the success of your hard work.
And
I
I
think
totally, yeah.
sorry, I
Go
was just
ahead.
going to add, I think it's incumbent upon us, if you understand that, to share that idea with other people that maybe
Right.
don't see that or don't understand that. So.
Well, Mark brought up he said, I'm not good enough. There's everybody at some point in time feels I'm not enough. I'm not good enough.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
deserve this. And, I've been working with a local therapist on some couples counseling. And it's amazing what you learn, because she's like, you have this well of hurt. And when you get triggered and you have a reaction, it's like, how old are you right now? And it's like, oh, I'm 5-year-old Karlyn, who's been told fill in the
yeah.
blank in this
Mhm,
unstable home, and I turn the tap of that well of hurt.
mhm,
And the first thing is recognizing you have a well of hurt, and then you're like, well, so now do I feel powerless? Yes, 5-year-old Karlyn is powerless to change
mhm,
anything, but 60-year-old Karlyn can do something about that. And
mhm,
so it's
mhm.
it's really been empowering, because everybody feels that way. I mean, I can sit there and go, I can break a world record and go, oh, that time is 20 seconds slower than I used to do. That's pretty slow. It's like, hey, but it's a world record for your age group, and
Mhm,
you know what,
mhm,
it's an accomplishment, so celebrate it as such, and
mhm,
celebrate those around you, you
mhm,
know
mhm,
so
mhm.
just kind of always, I think the mental strategy to showing up and doing over is just like is training,
Mhm,
and as Mark
mhm,
is saying, you got to try a bunch of different things to find what works for you.
mhm,
And
mhm.
it's not a one size fits all thing. So if I'm
Yeah,
in the pool training,
it's funny how often we even look for failure to prove that we're not adequate enough, that we're not good enough.
oh,
You know, you just mentioned the idea of a time. You know, like you just swam your eyes out and you're 20 seconds slower than you were 20 years ago, and
yeah,
you know, you can find a way to say, well, look at me, I'm such a loser. And yet, wait a second, wait a second, wait a
wait
second.
a second,
You
yeah,
know, like if you're already sort of comparing your times, wait a second, you're still in the pool, you're still doing really well, you're still successful. And you know, it's sort of one of the reasons that, you know, with the across the lake swim, for the people who do it several times, you know, we don't, and in fact, most people don't actually remember their actual time. Did you do it in 33 minutes or 38 minutes? Or like, who gives a damn? You swam across the goddamn lake, you know,
exactly.
and that is worth remembering, that you were successful. And now, you know, like for people who have swum it before, they might be quick to, you know, criticize their own event because they were swimming a minute slower than the year before. But so what?
So
You know,
what?
you know, it
I
doesn't matter
always
because it's successful because in its own right, without the time being attachment
Well,
to it.
and Mark brings up a really great point. But the across the lake swim event is the culmination of multiple decisions and actions beforehand.
Hmm.
Like, if you don't sign up, okay, you can sign up, but that's one part. Then you do the training. Then you got to show up. Then you got to show up, and then you actually complete it. And people forget that there's all kinds of times where you could sit there and say, I'm not fit enough, I'm not fast enough, maybe I
Hmm.
don't want to do it, and
Hmm.
and then hopefully the self-talk turns around and says, look,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
beautiful day. What if I
yeah,
don't swim it? That's back at 1,000 shot, what did the Wayne Gretzky
yeah, yeah,
quote you just
yeah,
said. It's like, what if I don't show up? Well, then I'm going to regret it. I've never regretted doing something
yeah,
after
yeah,
the fact, but I certainly have regretted not going to training, not doing something, or not trying something. So signing up, showing up, and then doing it. That's
yeah,
three big things. That's follow
yeah,
through. And you
Yeah.
do that a couple of times and you gain confidence that you can, that still sounds like the alcoholic, that says, I'm going to do it differently tomorrow, but fails and continues to fail.
That's a really
And
interesting correlation.
it's
Yeah,
true. So
you've got to have the courage to try something every single day. I mean, I think Eleanor Roosevelt said something like, uh, do something every day that scares you, and essentially, what you're doing is you're fighting like the demons that you mentioned that we all have. We all have a little voice in our head that says, you can't do this, you're not good enough, you're not fit enough, you're not this, you're not that. And yet every single time you have the courage to break through that negative self-talk, you actually do start setting yourself up for success. And what I think is tremendous about, whether it's swimming or even just an across lake swim or just doing an event, is that every single time that you succeed in talking down your demons, you actually become better at almost anything else in your life. Because, whether you're fully applied to swimming, that's one thing. But now all of a sudden, like, hey, can I get that job, or can I go back to school, or can I do this or learn a new skill, learn a language? You can immediately have that negative self-talk. Oh no, you're not smart enough, you're not this, you're not that. And yet, wait a second, I learned how to swim, I learned how to do this, I learned how to swim across the lake, I learned how to become a better swimmer, I learned how to do a whole bunch of things and even excel at it. So why not take that experience in one milieu and put it into a whole new one? And all of a sudden you become a very successful lived life, if you will.
That's great.
That's an awesome point, Mark. So just to bring this back to kind of like the theme of open water swimming. So like these life lessons, episode 1, I talked to Mark and our first guest about how the fact that I am like, I love to swim in the ocean, but I petrified of swimming in lakes because I can't see the bottom. Right. Now, I mean, it's kind of, marginally related to what you talked about, but how do you take those issues that were really kind of wrapped in vulnerability that you talked about, and how do you bring that into what you teach when you, when you're at your camps or when you're working one-on-one, and like, how does that life experience come into swimming in open waters?
Well, actually, it's not my life experience, it's yours. So
Okay.
I actually just put a little ad up on Facebook, Lessons in the Lake, with Karlyn and Okanagan Lake. And this morning I had like six or seven emails, and it was great. So I'm chatting with this gal named Connie, and she says, I'm a beginner swimmer. I'd learned how to swim more. Like to learn how to swim better. So my next question is, okay, you're middle age. What has prevented you from swimming it to this point? And I said, do you have a fear of the water? Did you have a traumatic experience? And she texts back. This is like 2 texts back, right? And she says, yes, I nearly drowned when I was 10. And then a divorce happened at the same time. And I said, well, you have some trauma around the water. Before you can fully embrace the water and all of its wonderful gifts, you need to change your relationship with it. And that might mean doing some therapy on that trauma. Because from my understanding, you're still alive. So you succeeded in not drowning. So like an EMDR therapist can work through that trauma with a person just maybe one time, reframe it, reprogram it, and then we're really going to see some success in the water because that fear. So now, Jason, my question to you is, did you have a trauma when you were a kid?
Oh my God. that is the answer to that question is a pretty deep well. So my entire childhood was fairly traumatic. And like, I remember the first time that I had an open water, like it wasn't even an open water swim. We were down in Lake Placid for a swim meet, and I probably was 10 or 11. And at that time, the local club had organized the meet in the lake. So they had 2 buoys, 25 meters apart, so start blocks, the whole thing. So it was a pool and a lake, right? And I remember jumping in, and then right away I was like, nope, can't do that, right? Like I would swim across head up, no problem, but I couldn't put my face in. The odd thing or interesting thing about the whole thing was that every single race I struggled, right? Like I would swim across head up the whole way, except for the 100 fly. 100 fly, I just dove in.
And you got it with your head out.
Oh no! Like it was like lightning fast, right? Like, it was like I was swimming in the pool, right?
Yeah.
So, and I can't explain it. I don't know why, but swimming for me as a kid was an outlet. Like that's what kept me out of trouble. And
Yeah.
when I got myself out of the traumatic environment of home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a hard time going back to the pool because for so long it was just like that was my outlet, right? And like it was a place that helped, but at the same time there was a lot of like, because of its primary use as an outlet for me, like it was great during, after I didn't want to remember any of that stuff, right? So
Oh,
it was a challenge
interesting.
to say like I don't want to go back there, right? And then
Yeah.
oddly enough I got into coaching and then absolutely loved coaching. I loved helping the kids that were I guess had gone through a similar experience and
Oh,
needed
yeah.
the help, right? So so yeah.
So you could identify with their pain without, in a sense, acknowledging your own. I mean, it sounds like you needed the same do-over that Karlyn had talked about, in the sense that, you know, swimming for most kids when they're in their 5 to 10-year-old range, you know, it's generally a pretty positive experience. And yet, you know, something has happened in the meantime, whether it's overlying other personal traumas. And now, of course, now you're an adult and you kind of want to re-embrace that whole process and start again, the do-over, if you will, but this time in
Yeah.
a more constructive way, right? Without having whatever those traumas are, just like what Karlyn was describing, how you know, it's the 6-year-old in you or the 10-year-old in you that is actually feeling the pain or the fear or whatever. But now that you are an adult, you can say, no, I'm not that 10-year-old anymore. I'm now
Yeah.
the adult, and I can reapply some more common sense and face those fears again. And maybe this time you're going to have smooth sailing if you build and double down to a more positive experience the second time through it, because you're going to control it as an adult where you didn't control it before as a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the things that I appreciate that, Mark. I believe that's 100% accurate. One of the things that came out of COVID for me was like I realized that my entire life I was manifesting busy to not confront and not deal with all the baggage and demons and so on and so forth. And then COVID happened and I had to stop. And the first, like at first I was in denial. And then there was a certain period where, man, it was really hard because all of a sudden you stop and everything comes back up to the top. And oh, we lost. Oh, there we go. Everything comes back up.
I was going to say it's like a wave. Like you stop long enough
100%.
and the wave you've been running in front of just crashes over you and you cannot deny it.
Beautiful analogy. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. And then you can realize that the wave doesn't actually kill you. It just forces you to learn something about yourself.
100%.
And now, once the wave is passed, there's now a new trough that you're into, and now you can kind of re-embrace what you were trying to learn in the first place.
Yeah, it is my goal to do to actually swim the across the lake swim either next year or the year after that. You know, once I've had my chance to do my work and so on and so forth. So perhaps I'll come see you, Karlyn, for some help and so on.
Yeah. But you know what? So when you asked me the question, how do I help people swim better? Of course, I do that on a technical standpoint. But I know that whenever there's somebody in front of me that has signed up for a lesson, that thinks I have the answers and is willing to part with money, they're going to invest in themselves. I'm there for a reason. And it's really funny. Only a small part of it is often the swim technique, and a bigger part of it is moving past these limiting beliefs. And I can actually, when somebody walks in the water, I can read how they're feeling about the water. And like sometimes it's just as simple as somebody gets cold in the pool that they train in is really freezing, and I'm like, well, wear a wetsuit. Well, no, I can't do that. I say, yes, you can. Because I have cold trauma too. I was freezing as a kid. So the last thing I want to do is get cold, because when I get cold, I get anxious. When I get anxious, I get angry, so all these things. So sometimes it's just giving somebody some advice, but the biggest one really is the trauma. And it's amazing how many people, a recent girl reached out to me from New York, and she said, I swim great in a pool, but when I get in a large group of people, I panic. And I'm like, did you have an experience? So there's a trigger somewhere, and you figuring out, the first thing is being aware that there's a trigger, and then the second step is doing something about it. And it's a little scary because you've got to kind of walk through your whatever it was, but it's just like ripping off the scab. The scab's there. It's kind of gross, but and then you got to treat it. But we start getting relief right away. I mean, it's amazing because it's about your relationship with the water, and we all have a different relationship based on our past.
Yeah, and some people don't even have a relationship with water. They've never had swimming lessons. They've never had the time, or they've had such a superficial exposure to water that they've never really learned in any real way to embrace it. There was a Gallup poll about 20 years ago that said about 40% of Americans feel uncomfortable in the deep end of a pool, and 60% of Americans feel uncomfortable in the deep end of a lake, if you will. So in true open water settings, the majority of Americans, in fact, probably the majority of people on Earth have never had enough experience in water to ever feel comfortable in it. So, the idea that fear is a central part to arguably a majority of people as adults, and so for most of those people, whether they've had a real experience, a fear or a true traumatic experience in water, or even just a perceived one. Well, geez, I was in deep water, and I'm so glad I got out. There was nothing actually that happened, but already they were feeling overwhelmed by the fact that they were in water in a very uncomfortable milieu for them. And sure enough, as you say, here are people that have baggage, if you will, that they need to get over. And sometimes it's one little small step at a time, dealing with the cold, first of all, and then maybe realizing, yes, you cannot see bottom in a lake. And yes, there are waves. Yes, there's wind. Yes, you can see forever, and that makes it look expansive and, overwhelming. And, there's a whole bunch of things that you have to work through one at a time. And like with the Across Lake Swim, we have the same issue. Probably about a third of all of the people that swim our event have never done the event before, and they've never swum across a large body of water before. And, they say, oh yeah, I can swim 2,000 meters in a pool. Why can't I do it in a lake?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Sure enough, I say there are 15 differences that are not swimming in a pool versus swimming in a lake, or any other body of water for that matter. There are these 15 differences, each one of which will add to your anxiety to a point where you can't do this. So, I'm no great swimmer or great swim coach, but like I said, it's just the simple stuff. Let's talk about one thing at a time. And there are people who actually are pretty good swimmers, and they swim across the lake with their eyes closed because they don't want to know what they don't see, sort of thing. So, there's one woman who she deliberately doesn't wear goggles because she doesn't want to actually look in the lake
at the bottom. That's crazy.
And she actually won the ITU World Championships as a triathlete in the 90s. That's how good of a swimmer she is. And yet she has trouble swimming across the lake.
So it doesn't matter. Hey, one last thing I'd like to add about the trauma. And Mark was saying, the 15 differences. Mark is such a statistic guy. He loves these numbers, and it's like 15 different ways that it's different. And I like that because you pick one. But besides having your own personal traumatic experience, it might not be you, it could be your family. So we have a lot of immigrant families. So what is the familial message around water? That can be, and your parents don't swim, or somebody in their family had a near drowning. So they're super terrified about you, and they instill that fear in you. So you might not have ever had an experience, but the message when you went by the water was terror. You're going to die. The devil lives in the water. I heard that from a guy that lived on the Rio Grande. He goes, no, I love the water. My mom didn't, So you kind of dig back through those messages and go, that's, and then once you've identified that, you go, okay, that's not my message, So it's pretty amazing. And then, it's really freeing. One of my favorite sayings when it comes to swimming is, and in life too, whether by a thread or a chain, a bird cannot fly. So we find the chains. Those are the big obvious things that are tethering the bird from taking off, but not the threads. So we got to fine tune what we're looking for and find where those threads are and see what we can do to cut them, set you free.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like, it's like, yeah, forget about the swimming technique stuff. We need to talk about this, because this, if I just spend that much time with you talking about, I can work past the trauma to begin with, but in the long run, you really want to set yourself loose, untether. And that's what open water swimming is. You are untethering from land, and you're like a space, you just left the mother spaceship and you are floating free. You have no attachment to that spaceship. And it's a freeing feeling, and you really want to share it with other people, but it's kind of hard when they're afraid they're going to die.
Well, there's a significant amount of trust, I suppose, especially when you're talking to people that have their own trauma to deal with, right? Because at the end of the day, when you let go, as you put it, you're trusting in something or someone that you're going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I guess, really, you're trusting yourself, right?
Yeah.
And if something's destroyed that trust or disabled that trust, then you're dealing with that. So.
Yeah, I always like to say, fake it till you make it. I had a client that he was so afraid of the deep end, and so we were in the shallow end, and I just said, I'm going to turn this around. I said, okay, I want you to sink to the bottom for me. Just sink to the bottom. Go to the bottom. It's only 3 feet. It was impossible. He couldn't sink. And all of a sudden he came up and his eyes were like, and it's like something as simple as that. And then he feels empowered to move to the next step, which is to let go of the air. You can't hold on to your breath. So in swimming, it's like walking up a flight of stairs. If you want to swim successfully, you've got to let go of at least some of the air in your lungs before you can take another breath. Same thing with when you're walking up a flight of stairs. You have to let go of the bottom step before you can land on the next step to move forward. So you've got to let go of something to get something. And that air thing, it's like, Mark's seen this a ton of times, especially with the beginners. You swim as long as you can on that one breath, and then, so you got to, and water is made of oxygen. So I always think of water as a female. You got to give her give her some love, give her some oxygen. And so she can breathe too, and then you'll be able to breathe easier. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, we actually talk about water as being as somebody mentioned earlier. For some, water looks like it's the devil, if you will. But water is actually just a physical element. 70% of the world's surface is water. It's remarkable that so many of us have such a bad relationship with something that is overwhelmingly common on the planet. And so, just what you were mentioning earlier, like I do this similar sit on the bottom drill. And, the first thing I do with these beginners is let's get into chest deep water. And I ask them to sit on the bottom just for 5 seconds. And of course, they all pop up like a cork. And then, of course, then I admonish them and I say, look, I told you to sit on the bottom. And then they say, well, I can't. It's like, well, exactly. The lake doesn't actually want to swallow you up. It wants to spit you out. And essentially, what you really need to do is look at water as little more than a clumsy dance partner. You actually have to just sort of get used to what the water does and does not do. It's not out to get you. The water doesn't care a damn about you. It just has a couple of rules of thumb that you need to understand. And once you do, then it becomes an enjoyable experience to do all kinds of things in the water and on the water, whether that's windsurfing or kiteboarding or any number of other things. All of a sudden, the water is your friend. You know what it's capable of. And yes, you still have to respect it. But nonetheless, it doesn't have that ominous, scary part to it anymore because it's just bound by physical laws, and the laws aren't complicated.
But Mark, you said, okay, the earth is 70% water. What are our bodies?
70% water.
So if we're speaking negatively to the water, we're actually speaking negatively or thinking negatively about ourselves as well.
Ourselves. Yeah, exactly. Water, we need to embrace ourselves as part of that. In fact, if you want to be evolutionarily minded, humans, derived their life force from, historically waterborne beings. I mean, at some point,
Yeah.
70 million years ago, we were all water creatures and eventually moved to land. So we were at once one with water. And there's no reason that we can't look at other mammals and sort of appreciate that, you know what? Killer whales and walruses and seals and dolphins, they don't seem to have any fear of water.
No,
They're
So
kind
Jason,
of okay with it, They work
Jason,
with
you
it. They
probably
know what
weren't
it's
sure.
all about.
Like you probably didn't think that this would be going in this direction, this kind of little esoteric idea about water, but it's really the foundation to that freedom we're looking for, to actually swim, is the relationship, understanding with the water. I love it, the clumsy dance partner. And the fact that we're made of water. So if I'm in the middle of a swimming race and I'm like saying, Karlyn, you suck, you're dying, you're falling apart, my body's going to hear that, and it's going to respond accordingly. It's going to believe that belief, right? And so when I'm getting in the water, like yesterday I was swimming with Corey, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, wow, I'm really starting to get tired. It's like, come on, hold strong, you're doing great, and I just pep talked myself into just really finishing strong, and my body believed it. And I actually have had some of my more competitive clients test that in the endless pool. So I'll say, okay, we're going to have you swimming at a speed about 85%. So it's pretty hard. And I want you to be saying, I'm comfortable. And I don't remember if we did this with you, Mark. So I'm comfortable. I'm winning. I'm beating the current, because the endless pool has that current. And I said, now I'm going to bop you on the head with a noodle. And I want you to change your thought process. I want you to think, I suck. I'm doing horrible. I'm losing. And you immediately get pushed back. So, and your blood runs cold, and then I bop you again, and I say, change your thoughts to more positive, whether or not you believe it or not, doesn't really matter. You just say it to yourself, and you power back up to your current, the previous speed. And it's amazing. It's like, so I actually, a lot of people will say that, don't get negative. And I'm thinking, you need to teach yourself to go negative and pull yourself out of it, back to the failures that are actually the successes. Like, catch your thoughts and change it around. But teach yourself, go negative on purpose, fake it, and then positive, and you'll be amazed and just go, wow. I mean, I've done that swimming in a pool next to somebody. Oh, they're getting ahead. And sure enough, I drop back, and then I change my mindset, and I just power right on up. And so just get in there and you talk to the water.
Talk yourself into being one with the water, because you are mostly water, and what you're in is mostly water. So you are one with the water, quite literally.
Zen Master Mark, as always. Well, Karlyn, this has been this discussion went everywhere I thought it was not going to go, which means I had no idea where it was going to go. But this was an incredibly illuminating discussion, and I really enjoyed where it went. It was, the right combination of empowering, vulnerable, and inspiring. So I really appreciate that.
We're going to expect you in the water before you know it, Jason.
We're going to.
I'm working on it. Because I have 3 young daughters who love the water. They were all in the kids splash, and our eldest just went, the beep went, and she just took off, and the 2 little ones are, they just turned 5, so they're teeny tiny, they got kind of scared away by all the bodies moving all at once and whatnot. But my wife just grabbed them, and they swam with them across the line, and they came across, and they enjoyed it. I think if you heard somebody, like a little kid, kind of screaming her lungs off, that was my daughter. And but she was really proud to have accomplished that, and so on and so forth. And when she learned about it and saw what her big sister did, she's inspired to do it again next year. So
that's great. So she's going to be inspired with the water as well. Being one with the water, and as long as she stays in there, that's what's key. I mean, these little kids, I mean, it wasn't that long ago when they were in a womb, which was
all
water.
My kids love the water, like pool, lake, ocean, whatever. They're always in playing it, which is amazing, because I'm glad that I'm always cognizant of the fact that I want them to develop their own unique joy and around the water. So, and
they will help you teach the fact that you're missing something that they've got.
Yeah.
and it will put pressure on you to actually go, okay, what's my limitation here, and you realize it's all in
Yeah.
your head.
I mean, there are certainly moments where like I just get into like I remember being at the Great Barrier Reef about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, whatever, and just like lining up on the edge of the boat and just diving in and just going, and I loved it, right?
Yeah.
And but there are certain, like I said, it's not really the ocean, it's more so, you know, the lakes and stuff like that, and like that is, you know, as I'm learning, you know, like, you know, a much more involved solution, right? And as you brought up, and you know, like I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about trauma in the water before, Karlyn, so I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, it's funny because I sit there after a lesson and I'm always like, that was a life-changing session, and not just from a swim technique. I mean, I helped them get faster, but I wanted to take the time to thank Mark for the persistence and follow through, and all the hard work on another successful across the lake swim. I mean,
Amazing, Mark.
you guys have the patience, you know, and reorganizing, and it's just, you know, when I first got back into master swimming, you realize that this whole, you know, race directors for swim meets and open water directors are creating a stage for you to perform, for you to test yourself, right? Without that stage, we're just a bunch of lap swimmers. You know, so that's what's beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with being a lap swimmer. Not, you don't need to compete, but the whole idea is you have people that step up, take their time and energy, and create these amazing events, and then as a result of that, collectively, we all had this experience. And I was going to say, you know, Mark knows that I swam over with Brent Hobbs, who was first across the line, second overall. We warmed up by swimming at the easy the first way, and that was just, it was so awesome. I will never take the bus again, because it was like I could control some things that I wanted to control, but I really got to experience the joy of the lake before I kind of expected anything from it. And that's what I do when I get into warm up. Usually if I jump into swim in a pool, or the first 25 or 50 yards, I play. I feel the water. I let it hug me. I push off the bottom. I become a little mermaid. And then I get into my warm up. But I like to have that transition from where I'm, you know, I'm returning to the womb, so to speak. And I'm just reminding myself this is where I love, you know. So, you know, get in and be more playful, you know. And it's okay to wear toys.
Yeah. that night, I don't remember exactly how old she was, but the 90
9-year-old,
the finish line erupted like a Canucks game. Well, maybe not the Canucks, like maybe, you know, talk about a winning team. Sorry, but you know, like it was a professional sporting event when she crossed the line, and like the amount of noise that came out of that finish line, and congratulations to what she had done was pretty awesome.
Connie's amazing.
Yeah, and like that's I mean, like that's really what the swim is about, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, there was a point, and we always do this. We always have the oldest swimmer and the youngest swimmer standing next to each other, and invariably, it's, you know, obviously Connie's the oldest ever, but we always had somebody in their 80s, and we'd always have either a 6 or 7 or an 8-year-old standing next to them, and so, you know, from one age spectrum to the other end, you know, this swim has something for just about everybody. And that's why we think of it as such an inclusive event, and we emphasize it as an event and not so much a race. And you know, to the idea that you know, we try to create this inclusiveness, we also want to have a broad sense of support. That's why we do those 5 weeks worth of introductory lessons in the open water, to fully embrace people's, you know, desire to take those steps. I mean, if without that, you know, like, okay, you know, a lot of people sign up and they go, oh, can I do it? And they think they can. And of course they wind up being pulled out of the water because they don't realize or didn't really give enough credit to some of the differences that open water gives them that they don't see in the pool. So after 5 weeks of lessons, you know, most of them are feeling more and more secure in themselves. And I think that's half of the embrace. And, you know, when you have somebody like Connie and somebody like a 7-year-old who has been well embraced and has done this so many times, and obviously in each time knowing that there's lots of support around at the beginning of the race, on the water, at the finish line, it becomes just an embracing event, you know, and that's what makes, I think, this event such a magical experience for everybody.
Yeah, and I don't know of any other open water swim that hosts free workshops, 5 of them prior to that, you know. And it's not like we want your money, here's your t-shirt. It's like we want to build a community around this
Yeah,
and help
yeah,
you have the best possible experience, not just for
yeah,
that day, but continuing
yeah,
on, because everything that they
yeah,
learned in those, that's
yeah,
really empowering, you
yeah,
know, Mark,
yeah,
and that's what sets this apart.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's
thanks.
why yeah.
And you know, even for me personally, you know, having had the experience of being a family physician for many years, you know, and trying to help people one at a time. And you know, I didn't actually always have the same feeling of success in helping
Yeah.
somebody change their life. You know, like you have somebody who's got a bad cough and you fix it, but you don't really get to the bottom of why they have their cough and all their smoking habits and everything else. You know, here's the problem, fix it, sort of thing. And they perpetuate their problems. Whereas, you know, in open water and learning how to actually sort of expand your horizon to an entirely new milieu. I mean, you've spent your entire life sort of being on land. Now let's do the other half of the planet, which is water. And now, as soon as you can get into this and start to appreciate it for what it is, your world has just blown up and become a much wider experience for which it can have a lot more successes. So I found that I at least feeling like I was making more of a difference to more people, helping people embrace swimming in open water than what I did in a medical career, which is somewhat shocking. I would never have thought that myself, but I do now.
That is amazing. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's the beauty of an open water swimmer is, you know, first of all, safety first, right? Don't ever get in if you don't know how you're going to get out. But the
Yeah,
beautiful thing is like I look around, especially living in Hawaii and taking people on these swim camps, is like I'm looking, I was like, I can swim there, I can swim there, I can swim there, I shouldn't swim there, you know, and
mhm.
I just it's the possibilities are unlimited in
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
places. It's so free, you know, freedom is
Yeah,
such a
your
great word.
world and of course in Hawaii you get to swim with manta rays and dolphins and turtles and you know explore a world that you've never seen before if you've never been in the water. And it's
Yeah.
rich, it's huge, and it's expansive, and it's just stimulating. I mean, like how not to
It
love
really
that?
is. Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, we were talking about fish the other day and how in Hawaii a lot of times the fish are so conditioned to people being in the water they scare you. Well, we're offering swim camps in Huatuco, Mexico, and in Sicily, and the fish there aren't scared. There's like I don't know whose universal intelligence these guys are getting, but it's really funny. They just and we were in Belize, the same thing. The fish just swim right to you.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
but you know, it's just like wow, you get to swim in an aquarium. That's just
yeah,
amazing, you know.
yeah.
So yeah, it is truly a gift, and thank you, Mark, again for putting on that race, and it was just fantastic. And looking forward to coming back next year, and then
Well,
the
looking
other
forward to
races
having
that
you.
you're offering as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Thanks. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Well, that's awesome, guys. Thank you for taking the time to be here and share, you know, what is, you know, a fantastic amount of knowledge, information, perspective, all that stuff. So,
oh,
you know, I'm going to let you guys get on with your day and thank you for joining us. And, you know, I guess one thing we'll add, Karlyn, is we're giving away a safe swimming package with this episode.
oh, cool.
So we'll send you the link and you can share it on your Facebook page. And that package will include a swim buddy, a bright colored cap, and a pair of goggles. So,
Awesome. That's so awesome. Thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
the swim buddies are great. Yeah, Mark, you're a pioneer in that one. That's for sure.
Well, you know, it's just one more way of getting people feel comfortable. You know, it's really just a you know an apron string for a lot of people, but nonetheless, just knowing that it's there, it's just a security blanket. And of course, there is reason for it. I mean, here we have a lot of power boats, and you want to be
Right.
seen out there for sure. You don't want to get run over.
100%.
Well, I
100%.
know that during our swim camps, we have our campers wearing them when we put a bottle of water and a squeeze pack of applesauce. So they're
Yeah,
carrying nutrition and hydration,
yeah,
and
nice.
we can see where they are, and they
Yeah,
can see where we are, and it's
yeah,
it's it's a game changer. Anybody that doesn't embrace that simple, doesn't even bother you, the swim buddy is a definite must, especially if you have any anxiety issues. So
yeah, for sure.
get your swim buddy.
That's awesome. Well, again, thanks for joining us.
Thank
Look forward
you.
to connecting again
Yeah,
soon. And
thanks for doing this, Jason.
yeah, and we'll see where this takes us next. Hopefully, this is the beginning of something great. So,
Great.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.
all right.